future performances got canceled. We actually did do one in Northern California, and as we drove back was the
stay-at-home order?
Exactly. We literally were performing at a college as everyone in that audience got a text message saying,
"Go home." Happy Friday, everybody. I'm Brendan Bradley with the Fifth Wall Forum, committed to bringing together industry insiders from the theater and technology worlds to create opportunities for new kinds of virtual performance. And today I'm having a conversation with Diana Wyenn, a director, writer, and choreographer of contemporary and original works for theater, opera, film, digital, and site-specific performance, including her upcoming performance of Blood Sugar about her personal journey with diabetes. Today's conversation is brought to you by the Fifth Wall Forum Discord channel, a robust community of hundreds of technologists and artists sharing job postings, tutorials, upcoming performances, and the home of Artifact Friday, where our mentors and collaborators share artifacts from their work, giving Fifth Wall Forum members a first glimpse at the latest in innovation in immersive storytelling. Find out more at our website at fifthwallforum.com. That's 5thwallforum.com. And now let's get to the conversation. Welcome, Diana.
Oh, thank you, Brendan. It is so great to be here with you, sharing time.
I'm excited to have you on the conversation today about a show that I have watched evolve the entire time I've known you.
Ours is 17 years deep.
Full disclosure, Diana and I have shared a lot of time together. 17 years ago, we were at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts together. And I've been a fanboy of her career ever since. I've gone to many of her shows. She's come to many of mine, and I am so delighted.
Yeah. I'm so excited to continue our 17-year conversation.
Now, you've worked on a lot of hybrid projects in the last year. A Lesson in Swimming, which was a radio play, Who Is It by Michael Schutt, and your own Blood Sugar, which we will get to in a bit. But I wanted to start with the experience directing Christina Wong for public office in the before times, and then the process of remounting it during the pandemic.
So Christina Wong is this amazing performance artist based here in Los Angeles, and her work is like deeply rooted in activism. And when a certain individual got elected into office, she was questioning, how performance art seemed tamer than politics, and politicians seemed to be the performance artists at this point. And she asked if I wanted to join her on an adventure of her exploring this. And of course, I jumped right in because we've worked together before, and I was super curious what she was thinking about. And she actually ended up running for public office.
Interesting.
So when we began the process, she hadn't applied to run for anything. It was just that we were going to announce that she would potentially run for something. And here we are now, and she's a council member in Koreatown, doing great work down there. So over the course of 2 years, we built that show from her lived experience, which involved like Alex Jones going after her web series for kids and all sorts of wild adventures she had as a council member and just as a human being living in these times. And we devised a show that was meant to be as interactive as possible.
And what does that mean?
So we had the audience up on their feet dancing. We had, people talking to each other during the show. And we were able to, before the pandemic hit, in February 2020, premiere the work at the Skirball Cultural Center here in Los Angeles. 300 people, riotous laughter, incredible send-off for this work. And then the pandemic started to manifest, and we watched as future performances got canceled. We actually did do one in Northern California, and as we drove back was the
stay-at-home order?
Exactly. We literally were performing at a college in Sacramento as everyone in that audience got a text message saying,
"Go home.
Please pack up your things and go home. We don't know when you will be back."
Wow.
And then we drove home from Sacramento looking at each other going, what's next? We actually put it to the side. She was moving on and actually sewing masks for vulnerable populations. And she now has I think something like 800 people as part of the Auntie Sewing Squad. And while she was doing that, I started transforming Blood Sugar, because also watching everything shut down, I realized that my community, I have type 1 diabetes, so the diabetes community was at higher risk of mortality and of complications if we caught COVID. And so it kind of became more imperative than ever to kind of share my story. And I got to work with my video designer. We started on a virtual version. And it was actually a run through that I shared with Christina that prompted her to go, wait a minute, you mean I could dance down my staircase in Christina Wong for public office? And I was like, of course you can. You can dance all over your house. So then we got to working on hers. And it's interesting because for my project, we're using vMix and 3 cameras in my house, 2 laptops and a roaming cell phone. But for hers, because it was so interactive, because it was all about the audience engaging with each other, we realized that just a live stream wouldn't cut it. And we adapted that project for Zoom so that I could poll the audience. I could spotlight the audience as they were dancing. Every moment of interactivity in person became a moment for interactivity in Zoom. And because we were all stuck on Zoom for so many hours, it was really fun to show people how fun it could be.
And then, if I recall correctly, there's then a secondary virtual performance that was done. Was it at the Kirk Douglas?
Yes. So that wasn't enough. So we actually toured like 20 different venues via Zoom over the course of October, September and October leading up to the November election. And then CTG, Center Theater Group, tapped us and said, hey, want to do it at the Kirk Douglas with no audience.
Do the participatory show with no audience.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was wild because I think everyone was like, great, let's do it. And I was like, wait, the whole show was built for this interactivity. Like it's just being ripped away from me, but you're giving me 4 cameras. Okay, what do I do with this? And so we actually rewrote those sections in addition to just restaging the piece on a whole new stage. I choreographed the roving camera and Christina so that the panicked moment where she used to run all over the stage, now is her running actually out and into the wings and he has to chase after her off stage. And so I kind of used these moments and these markers to bring a new level of engagement to the work. And most importantly, when we asked people to poll when we would usually say, turn to your neighbor, that became her turning to the audience and then turning around to the camera because we, for the first time, shot and showed the entire audience empty and said, well, I used to say this, but you at home. And so I feel like solo performance kind of had a leg up as we were all adjusting to online presentations because she could just talk to you. And something I recognized in Blood Sugar early on, talk to one person, just like I'm talking to you right now. In a theater, we address the whole crowd and it works beautifully. But in this online experience, it's really one-on-one. You might have a couple people on the other side watching, but more often than not, it's one person. And so it kind of feels like, Jason, my video designer, Jason Thompson from Blood Sugar, he was joking and he said, I think what we're building is like an epic FaceTime. And we both laughed. This was early in the process. And then 2 days later, we got back together and I said, that's exactly what we're building. This is just like a FaceTime. It is me talking to them. And it is incredibly intimate because I'm letting them into my house and you're welcoming me into yours out there.
Speaking of bringing people into their houses, I'd love to talk a little bit, because I don't think I've ever heard this perspective actually, the idea of doing a virtual tour to provide programming to playhouses that you're not actually getting to go to. That is such an interesting exchange for artists in this moment, that typically the advantage is that you're getting to go into that community, you're getting that performance opportunity, but now we're removing some of that in the sense that the artist is just Zooming from home and that's programming for the theater. What is that relationship like as far as finding theaters that you can perform at virtually, but then also does that in any way create the relationship or help create a relationship that might foster new voices and new storytellers to be able to enter those physical spaces now that they reopen?
I'm glad you're asking this, and I hope I cover a couple points because I'm really excited about how virtual performance can reach people that don't necessarily come to the theater. I just did a project about Lyme disease. I directed a new play, and afterwards we had a conversation with some experts in the field and invited folks to flip on their cameras. And folks who are chronically ill, sometimes they're not going to make it to the theater. And so we flipped on those cameras and several people are just laying down, enjoying the show right from where they are. And that's awesome because, I am with type 1 diabetes, I'm also chronically ill and invisibly disabled. And so I get it. And so being able to reach folks where they're at and provide these artistic experiences, like really robust ones that tell their story, especially when they're not necessarily going to cross town, cross that traffic and be able to sit in a theater sometimes. For example, like you mentioned, A Lesson in Swimming, the radio play by a 3-time stroke survivor. Well, I'm hearing that radio production is being listened to by other stroke survivors in stroke recovery units. Like we're hearing from their nurses that they're listening to Michael's journey as they are on their own, going through their own journey. And I think that's fantastic. I really hope that we as creators really expand what theater is, what the definition of theater is, as opposed to, constrict it in any way. And to your point about presenters willing to do this, well, what we built upon, especially for Christina's show, is that she had relationships with several of these presenters already because she's presented her work live there. And so they were already on board to do the stage version. And I applaud them for then inviting and welcoming us to do this virtual version. So a lot of the colleges and a lot of the presenters she already knew. And like for Blood Sugar, I was supposed to perform at Caltech. And thanks to Michael Alexander, when he said, I don't think we're going to be able to do your show in person, I said, well, I have a virtual version. And we actually were able to do that in November of 2020 when we were expecting to work together in March 2021. So I think there's something really exciting to the opportunities this can open up, but I also think it's really difficult for new voices to get through the virtual door. And I think that's something I encourage presenters to explore. And I say this as a presenter myself because I'm the artistic director at TIOH Arts and Culture and present work.
So do you think that these technologies in some ways accidentally perpetuate kind of the existing gatekeeping?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. It is hard because I think it's also new and we kind of fall back on what we know. And so as we march forward, I'm curious to see what happens, because for me as a presenter, I'm also curious about when I present somebody live, perhaps I can do a virtual engagement like 3 months before to introduce them to my audience, because at TIOH Arts and Culture, I was doing like 30-minute engagements where it was maybe 20 minutes of art and 10 minutes of intro and conversation. And so I got to really ask the artists questions about who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. And there was this intimacy. And I did that because I was asking them to perform solo in their home and broadcasting that into other people's homes. So it just felt like the right space for like a more intimate experience. And so I'm kind of excited and hopeful to like take that forward and then have their full 5-piece band or their full production complete with sound and lights on the stage. But I think there's something great about how accessible some of the virtual content is. And I say that with like, an asterisk next to it, because there's a lot of ways that it's still not accessible. My friend Michael Shutt, his site is forever changed. And so he can't actually read the chat. So Christina's show is amazing and wonderful and robust, but I knew that like that aspect of that show he didn't have access to. So I think it's really important that as we're designing these things, we're really thinking about ASL interpretation and live captioning and what to do for folks who are blind and low-sighted so that their experience is just as rich as others.
I love how diverse your experience is with this, and you do wear so many different hats depending on the show that you're working on. This last year, there's been so much kind of polarization over kind of using the term theater to apply either very broadly or very, very specifically. Jeremy O'Hara says, it's theater because I say it is. So I wanted to ask you, what makes something a work of theater to you?
Early in the pandemic, I was working on taking Directors Lab West online, and we did a series of conversations, and one of the people in conversation was Anne Bogart. And she expressed how theater was about sharing time. And in this, in this new realm, because I've heard a lot of folks talk about how the theater is about being in space together, in this like physicalized space.
Right.
And actually, like, as somebody who works in, site specific performance before this, I was like, well, sometimes I see a show and I'm in one room and someone else is in another room and there's a performer over there and I'm having a totally different experience 3 doors down. And, so are we sharing physical space? Yeah. But we're definitely sharing time. And so I think like that's why I love like when people talk about time-based art and being able to engage with that. But I also love the definition you gave where it's just like, because I said it is. Somebody also turned to me recently in a conversation and was like, Diana, this theater is dead. Theater has been dying for so many years. And I just like listened. And as he was talking, I just realized, I was like, oh, no, theater isn't dead. Theater is me saying, hey, can I tell you a story? Like that's all. It's so simple. But the structures and institutions that are creating and offering theater right now, a bunch of them are creaking and, some of them need to be rebuilt and some of them can go away and decompose and turn into what will flower next. So I'm excited for us, like you said, to expand what we feel like theater is. And I'm thrilled that so many of my projects are now like recordings that people can access from anywhere, but also like live experiences where, so like Blood Sugar is about diabetes and I'm performing from like nearly every room of my home except for the bathrooms. And you're watching like my husband at one point prepare food. And it was so interesting because my costume designer watched an early run and she was like, yeah, I started looking around my pantry. And I was like, that's incredible. Because in a black box theater, you might start thinking about your fridge and your pantry. But like here you are watching me on a screen, but the backdrop is your house, is your stuff and how you live. And what better setting to reflect upon how we live and how we can live.
This is why this should be like 4 hours long. Great. What is it when it comes to sharing time? What are your thoughts then on playhouses installing cameras in anticipation of streaming future shows or the real kind of archival market of starting to capture recordings that are then played whenever someone wants to hit that play button?
I think it's about intention because this excites me and concerns me all at the same time. Every project that I took online, I reconsidered for how the audience was going to receive it. Like, what is the user experience, to pull terms from other industries?
Sure.
And I don't think setting up cameras, pointing them at the stage is going to be the strongest way to capture a piece of theater. How do I explain it? It's like you have to set about to do that. Like knowing that CTG was setting us up to shoot, to have 1 day of prep and 1 day of filming and 4 cameras. Like I was able to take all that information in and like make it happen. But I was specifically making it the best experience possible for the people at home. So the people who were there capturing it and sitting off to the wings because they had awesomely helped me with props and costumes and all that stuff. It wasn't for them. It was for the people at home. And we were very specific about that as we captured it.
Right.
And I think as we come back into space, like we need to embrace the people who are there and perform it for them. And I think, Netflix and some of those folks do a good job of kind of this hybrid of like, we're filming the audience as well as the piece.
Kind of like stand-up comedy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but is that the best way to capture the work? Again, this is where like I think I had a leg up because so many of my projects were solo pieces. And the like opera that I was supposed to go like restage in Europe, like, yeah, that's on hold for a very long time. A lot of care needs to happen with how we're taking care of our audience and who is our audience. Is it the people in front of us or is it the people at home? Because they matter. Every single one of them matters.
And do you see those being tiers of experience that can exist concurrently, or is it putting a thrush show on a proscenium and you really can't serve both audiences?
I think there's ways to have different levels of experience, just like we were talking about with different experiences in an immersive. I was even talking today with our executive director. So for TIOH Arts and Culture, when we come back, there are going to be folks who are going to be more hesitant to return to in-person gatherings, and I still want them to have access to the programs that I'm presenting. So potentially we will still throw up some cameras and live stream these events, but I'm going to be really particular about camera placement because I don't want them blocking the live audience's experience. I think it's important also that they see that there are people there appreciating it too. But I think this is where the conversation about access for folks who can't necessarily physically get to your space on that night at that time, that's a great conversation to be having.
So diving into blood sugar, it has evolved in the last 17 years I've known you, from a personal journey to a stage journey to a web series journey at one point, and now this hybrid performance of you at home. Can you speak to what it's like as an artist to journey with this same piece through so many different mediums over the years?
Yeah. It's amazing because you were there. You're one of the few people since we were studying abroad that was there with me when I got diagnosed. And you weren't in the hospital, but you were among the first to know. And then among the last to know, because I will say, I got diagnosed and then I proceeded to hide the fact that I had this disease for the next 8 to 10 years.
Which is part of the show.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very important part of the show. Yeah. There's so much stigma and bias and shame and all sorts of stuff wrapped up in this disease that is very unnecessary. And my show unpacks and demystifies and all of that. It takes you on my journey. So, but I was secretive about it. And then I decided to kind of share. And so I did the 30 days of video blogs about it back in 2012, which was a blast. Not easy, but I'm really grateful that I did. And then I think it was the end of 2016, I read a statistic. I know people hate statistics, but it said 1 in 10 people in the US has diabetes in some form, and it could be 1 in 3 by 2050.
Wow.
And my heart broke because this is not an easy disease to live with. And 90% of cases are manageable and haltable and reversible up until a point. So there's a dividing line between that people like to create between type 1 and type 2. And I understand why that's there because it came about differently. But really, eventually, prediabetes progresses to type 2, which progresses to being insulin dependent. And that is very similar to my experience of diabetes. So I made a play about it to explain this. And I got on stage and shared my story. And I built that show over 2 years' time, sharing it as I went. And Jason joined the team after seeing a work in progress showing, and added live feed video and all sorts of projections, joined John Zalewski, who did the sound, and Joey Guthman, who was doing the lighting. And it was incredible. We premiered it in 2019 and I figured, okay, now I'm ready to go. And that's when, the pandemic then hit. And like I said, I felt like this was still a story that really needed to be told. So I just want people to know what this thing really is so that they can get the support that they need to live as healthy as possible, which meant setting up a green screen and lots of laptops in my house and 200 feet of cabling here and 5 computers over in Jason's place and, all sorts of stuff and slowly figuring it out. And we layered his projections from the live show into what would happen if they were, did they need to be behind me? Did they need to be on top of me? Did they need to be in a box to the side of me? Like every single moment was examined, tested, re-examined, rebuilt, and even amazingly enough, Jason at a certain point, we spent like 2 days just trying to figure out which computer to plug into which computer to get the the system not to crash. And so we got to a point where he had programmed the whole show, but then realized there was a better way to program the whole show. And so we went back and we reprogrammed every cue again. So I'm really proud of what came out. It's like I think it's the best version of the show I could have ever hoped for. I actually think like it's the optimized version. And I hope to take some of what we did and what we learned back into the theater version.
Speaking of kind of optimizing and finding kind of that next rung of support, that next version, what I like to ask on this podcast is, what is something that you're looking for right now that would help you level up the work that you're working on?
I'm looking for more opportunities to share my story. Yeah. I mean, that's what's at the core of this. It's interesting because I set out to share this show with folks who don't have diabetes. And it was really interesting because through the process, I met other people with diabetes. And as I said, I hid this aspect of myself for nearly a decade. And that was extremely detrimental, but that was my own journey. But now it was through this show that I met my community, and we are 400 plus million people worldwide. And so I am looking for more and more opportunities to share my story, but our experience of this life.
So if someone wants to share your story, tell them about the upcoming dates and where they can get tickets and how they can check out Blood Sugar, which I believe is next week.
Yes, it is next week. So I'm performing again live on Wednesday. That's at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's like, 2 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. over there in London where I got diagnosed. And then I'm also performing on Thursday at 6 p.m. here in Pacific Daylight Time, 9 p.m. on the East Coast, sometime in the middle of the night for London. But I think it's a great time because you wake up. My friend is in Korea and going to tune in. So like it's 10 a.m. for her over there. And you can learn more and you can get tickets at dianawyenn.com. So DIANAWYENN.com. You can get to everything you need there. And I want to say these 2 shows are free. They're free or pay whatever you like. And a portion of the proceeds are going to support the work of T1 International, which is an international organization that focuses on type 1 diabetes, because I have access to insulin, which means I can stay alive. But there are countries, there are people all over the world who don't. America, the U.S. is not the worst, but it is not the best in terms of our treatment. So this group is really fighting on behalf of and advocating on behalf of type 1s. And I'm also sharing a portion of the proceeds with the American Diabetes Association, which is near and dear to my heart because they are a service organization advocating for all forms of diabetes. So head to my website. The other thing that's on my website and will stay there, there's a recording of the last performance I did back in November for Caltech Live. And so that recording is also on my website and you can find it and you can watch it for free anytime streaming. The cool thing about the live shows, as I plug coming on Wednesday and Thursday, is that right after we're joined by diabetes experts. So diabetes educators and nutritionists join us, and they'll answer any and all questions that you have. And as I built this work, I realized that sharing my story cracked a lot of stuff open, and then people had a lot of questions. And some of those questions I can definitely field, but I am not a medical professional. So I bring medical professionals who can also help and kind of take this public forum and provide expert advice and resources.
Diana, thank
people.
you so much for your thoughtfulness on and off stage.
You too. Oh my gosh. And I hope I get to, I'm excited you're going to come see the show again.
Yes. See you Wednesday. Or I will see you Wednesday. You will not see me.
I'll see you because we'll be in the Zoom after.
Excellent. Thanks so much to Diana Wyenn for the conversation. If you want to join me on the show, find me online at the handle Brendan A. Bradley or go to fifthwallforum.com to find out more. I'm Brendan Bradley wishing you a happy Friday, and I'll see you next time.